From the beautiful city of Los Angeles, California, we bring you the Gimme 3 podcast. Hello and welcome, cinephiles, cinema lovers, movie appreciators, friends, and family to the Gimme 3 podcast, a series for cinephiles. This is the show where we pick 3 films based off of one theme. We are your hosts. I'm Nicholas Ibarra, and I'm joined as always by my friend Bella F. Stratus. Bella, what is going on the West Side today?
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited for this episode today. This was, not to jump into it immediately, but this episode marks my introduction to Roger Corman as a director. So I'm very excited to talk about him with you because I know that you are a big fan. And so I want to thank you for putting me on to this amazing director.
An incredible filmmaker all around. And yes, unfortunately, in our short time that we've been doing this show, we're already doing our second in memoriam episode. We said goodbye to Carl Weathers with a tribute episode to him in February. Mm-hmm. Check that out if you haven't already. And then on May 9th, we lost one of the most important and significant figures in the history of the film industry. And it's crazy to say a statement like that and not have it be an exaggeration or hyperbole or just like something I'm going to say for effect. Roger Corman, rest in peace, had changed the game. He changed the game multiple times in this industry. He changed the game. He was 98. So he lived a hell of a life.
I couldn't believe that. Yeah.
And was working into his 90s. He was working until not that long ago. And along the way, he earned several nicknames, including the Pope of Pop Cinema, the spiritual godfather of New Hollywood, and the King of Cult, just to name a few of his nicknames. And he was a jack of all trades. Mr. Corman directed 56 films in his career. And if you go to IMDb, Corman is credited with 491 producer credits.
Insane.
Yeah. That's it's just
insanity.
And it's for a good chunk of those, most of them. He was not just a producer by name. He was in the trenches. He was really the producer. He was a roll the sleeves up kind of guy and get it done. And he helped launch and magnify the careers of an insane list of filmmaking icons, including Martin Scorsese, Francis Ford Coppola, James Cameron, Peter Bogdanovich, Robert De Niro, Jack Nicholson, Jonathan Demme, Ron Howard, Penelope Spheris, Kat Shea, just to name a few. So with a career that spans so many decades and so many genres, with a career like that, how the hell do you narrow down the most prolific career in the history of cinema down to 3 films?
Impossible.
It is impossible. That's the answer. It's impossible. You simply can't do it. So for all of the Corman heads, you know better than I probably, there's so many different ways that we could have gone with this episode. We could have gone with his slasher arsenal, which he, produced so many memorable, incredible slashers in the 80s. Like that was his straight to video slashers was his thing in that time. We could have done a Gimme 3 on that. We could have done a Gimme 3 on Edgar Allan Poe adaptations because he directed, I think, 6 or 7 Edgar Allan Poe adaptations. A lot of those which are really fascinating and bold and brilliant to look at. Could have done that. We could have done famous filmmakers that he helped launch. We could have done a Gimme 3. We could have done a Gimme 30 of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the show's called Gimme 3. So what we are doing today, we may revisit those ideas in the future, by the way.
I'd love to.
Now that Bella's a big Corman fan.
Indeed.
But what we have selected here are 3 films that Roger Corman directed. Because, for the latter half of his career, he was mostly in the producer chair.
Mm-hmm.
This is 3 films that he directed, we believe had a direct cultural impact, not just on cinema, but on American pop culture as a whole. And we hope that you agree, and we hope that you have a good time with this, because we certainly had a good time. And that is what Roger Corman films were all about, having a damn good time at the movies. So here's to you, Mr. Corman. We dedicate this episode to you and your family. Thank you for providing us with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of films that we will probably never get to watch them all, but somehow you made them all in your incredible life. So here's to you, Mr. Corman. And Bella, you are going to start us off with a gem that we kind of, in a way, visited earlier this year, not too long ago.
Yeah, this is a film that I would say is familiar to the Gimme 3 podcast, especially if you guys have listened to our movie musicals episodes. You may be able to guess it. But yeah, directly after Roger Corman's 1959 horror comedy, A Bucket of Blood, Corman, as Corman does, he wildly seized the opportunity to reuse the old film sets for another project just before they're about to be dismantled. And so what initially began as a mystery kind of detective film quickly evolved into a horror comedy featuring a monstrous and ravenous man-eating plant. Roger Corman and co-writer Charles B. Griffith bounced around a few different ideas with each other before writing the final screenplay in a single weekend right before they were set to shoot the film. Only 3 days were spent on full cast rehearsals, and in the final 2 days before the Bucket of Blood sets were torn down, they shot the original The Little Shop of Horrors. While Corman's original version obviously differs from Frank Oz's musical adaptation that followed in the late 80s, both films share the same overarching theme, the dark and sinister lengths to which humans will go to satisfy their insatiable greed. The film stars Jonathan Hayes as Seymour Krelborn, a pathetic flower shop botanist who invents this bloodthirsty plant. We've also got Jackie Joseph as Audrey, the shop's florist and Seymour's love interest. And Mel Wells stars as Mr. Mushnick, the grumpy and very greedy owner of the flower shop. And then alongside the main floral shop crew, we've got a variety of really quirky characters, including, to name a few, Dick Miller as Burson Fouch, who's an eccentric flower-eating man. He treats florist shops like grocery stores. Yeah. One of my favorite characters.
so weird.
So random. I was like, what the hell's going on right now? He's like, I gotta go. My wife's got gardenias on the pot for tonight. I'm like, what are you talking about, dude? And then another great character is Leola Wendorf as Mrs. Shiva, a perpetually mourning woman who loses a relative every single day. So she comes into the shop every day to buy flowers for the funeral. But yeah, I love, I think watching this 1960s film, it's really easy to see that it kind of stands out as a groundbreaking genre-defying film. It blends so many different film styles and genres to just create one hell of a wild roller coaster of a film. Just having this kind of dark, classic Corman dark humor infused into it. But yeah, this is my first time watching the film. I know that you are a big fan of Little Shop of Horrors. Had you'd seen the original before then?
I had never seen this version, so I had seen.
Oh wow!
I had seen the musical a bunch, obviously, and I had not seen this. I absolutely loved it. I had a grand old time. I don't know why I had lower expectations. Actually, I do know why I had lower expectations. It's because they made it in 2 fucking days.
Yeah. I can't believe that. I don't understand.
That's why I had low expectations.
Yeah. Very fair, honestly.
But it was hilarious. I was laughing pretty much nonstop throughout this film, except for the third act when it gets it all starts wrapping up and it gets a little bit more serious and dark and
Mm-hmm.
sinister. But for the
Definitely.
first like 50, 60 minutes of this film, I mean, I was like laughing. It's just zinger after zinger after
Mm-hmm.
zinger. And it's like all of them they hit pretty well. I mean,
I think so
I had a
too.
damn good time.
I totally agree. I have to say I was also like, I think it was so cool to like have seen the musical and then see this. Because it was fun to compare them to just see like what the main differences were in story rather than
Mm-hmm.
like music, obviously. Um, but so I thought like the musical did a really great job with giving the dentist more of like a main storyline that actually connects them to the characters.
Yeah.
But the dentist in this was so out of pocket
Oh, he was
and like
intense. Yeah.
random. Yeah. And then I was so shook to see in the musical version, Bill Murray plays like the freak that loves the dentist's like
Yeah.
sadistic, painful treatment. And watching this one, I was like, oh man, this guy is so familiar. Like, who is this? And then I was like, oh my God, it's fucking Jack Nicholson. I
Jack
couldn't believe
Nicholson.
it.
So
He's
young.
so young.
So baby. I don't know if they have this
Hardly
in.
recognizable.
Yeah, he's really, really young in this one, and he's like got like a split down haircut. He looks like a clean cut guy. He's like,
Yeah. And his voice is all like nasally. I had to look it up to confirm, but I was like, I'm pretty sure that's him.
Most people don't like to go to the dentist, but I rather enjoy it myself, don't you? I mean, there's a real feeling of growth, of progress when that old drill goes in. I mean, I'd almost rather go to the dentist than anywhere, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Now, no Novocaine. It dulls the senses.
This is gonna hurt you more than it is me.
Oh, goody, goody, here it comes.
that's him. He was very close with Corman, and Corman kind of got Nicholson his start. I'm not sure if this was his first film role. Maybe it was this, or maybe it was Bucket of
I'm curious.
Blood.
Yeah.
But I think Jack Nicholson got his start, and a lot of his starts, with Roger Corman. So it's great to see him in this. And I love the one thing that popped me fucking hard. I don't remember this in the musical, so maybe it's there and I just missed it. But he goes in and he like sits down. I don't know if it's Jack Nicholson's character or Seymour, the main character, but they go into the waiting room of the dentist's office and he picks up a magazine, and it's Pain magazine.
I didn't even catch that. Oh my God.
It's just like Pain magazine. I was like,
what does that even mean?
It's a magazine. It's
nothing
journalism and articles about pain, about inflicting pain, about receiving pain. And I was like, Jesus Christ, that could have been a movie right there. Like Pain magazine. Tell me more about that. Like, there's just no wasted moments in this movie. It's like they didn't have time to waste on set, but they didn't waste any time in the script. There's no fat. It's a lean, 75, 80 minutes.
Yeah.
And
it's pretty remarkable.
Joke, story, joke, story, joke, story, wrap it up. It's banging.
Joke after joke after joke is what makes this such a fun watch. Like, obviously the concept is very original and interesting. But yeah, it's the way that it's written and the way the characters deliver their lines that just makes this movie so much fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, just like style wise, and the film starts with this, with like a brief little voiceover that kind of is like establishing the setting of the film on Skid Row. And that just like immediately reminded me of The Twilight Zone. Like every episode starts with Rod Serling's classic voiceover. Just as each Twilight Zone episode like descends into horror sci-fi madness, so does this film.
Yeah.
But then I feel like Corman goes even further by giving it his trademark kind of quirky, dark humor, which eventually makes it evolve into like a horror comedy. But I would argue that there's like so much going on in this film thematically and visually that it is honestly pretty hard to identify it as just like a single genre, even as just like a horror comedy. Because like visually, it also has this kind of, maybe this is a stretch, but I felt like in some scenes it had like a film noir vibe to it. It's got like the low lighting and the harsh shadows, and
Yeah.
the black and white imagery is very stark. And there's this awesome chase scene in the last half of the film that I thought really brilliantly uses this really intense lighting to like amp up the intensity of the scene. And on top of that, it's just such a fucking cool setting. Like the detectives are chasing Seymour through a pile of like giant truck tires in, I think, like a junkyard or something. And they've got these big spotlights cast onto some of the tires to like make the light and dark contrast that much more. And it's so like Seymour can almost like kind of hide in the shadows of the tires. I thought that scene was so cool. And then, yeah, just like cinematography wise, I feel like it's equally kind of ominous and shadowy as like Seymour, especially like over the last half of the film, like you said, when it gets a little bit darker and Seymour's like falling deeper and deeper into his own kind of like sinful greed. Like there's this really cool shot that I loved that it's when Seymour is disposing of like his first body and he's like, it kind of reminded me of like the shadowy, eerie style of like German expressionism, which I think is also a specific kind of like, I guess, iconography associated with film noir. Because like in this scene, we see Seymour's like dark figure and his shadow cast along the brick walls in the alleyway behind the shop. And he's like hauling this body bag up into it. And it just has this very haunting like look and tone to it. Almost like something straight out of Nosferatu, which is where I feel like the film really blends a little bit of these like film noir styles with horror conventions. And I just really loved that aspect of this.
Yeah, the technique is, I believe, referred to as chiaroscuro lighting, which is a technique they use in film noir a lot, and as you mentioned, in German expressionism quite a bit, where it's just like chiaroscuro is essentially like dark darks and light lights, like so the shadows are harsh and black and
that makes
nothingness
sense.
and rigid, and then you get like these, your eye goes to what pops. And I think it originated, like the chiaroscuro technique originated in like in painting, actually, like in
oh, cool,
classical painting. I'm not sure which era. Some art nerd will know, and please text me and let me know, because I do want to know, but that's where it originated. But you're totally right, and that's what's so awesome about this movie is like you have these like technical achievements that are just like, this is a well-made film.
Yeah, like it's really beautiful.
That scene you're talking about where he's about to feed the plant his first body, and it's got this foreboding imagery, and then he starts feeding the plant and he's like singing Deck the Halls to himself for no reason. I was just like, what?
He's like crying, feeding it.
I cackled.
Yeah.
I cackled when he came in and he's singing Deck the Halls. I was like,
I agree. I was like, interesting choice.
I was like,
I don't think it's even Christmas time. Yeah, it's not. Like, it's so fucking random. I also love how every kind of like accidental murder is just like him being so fucking stupid. Like that first murder, I was dying. He's like throwing a rock at a bottle by the train tracks, and then some dude just pops up and gets hit. I was like, and then he like stumbles back into the train tracks. I was like, you're kidding me.
Yes. He gets hit with the rock. You're like, oh my God, that's how he dies. And then he like gets back up. And you're like, oh no, he's not dead. And then he stumbles onto the train tracks and get ran over. It's just, I'm telling you, it's just hilarious. This is the funniest movie I've seen in a long time. I gotta say that.
Really funny. Yeah. I was like shocked how funny it was. I thought maybe like being the original, that the musical would have been the more like funny adaptation of it. If anything, it was like funnier than the 80s
I think it's
version,
funnier than the musical, because I mean the musical is I mean objectively probably a better movie, but
but it is reliant on the music.
It is reliant on the music. So there's these songs where they're fun and stylish and wonderful and absolutely brilliantly written, but with the exception of like the dentist song that Steve Martin does, The songs aren't loaded with jokes the way that these scenes are loaded with jokes.
Yeah, to the brim.
The last thing I have to say about this film, actually, I got two things to say.
Yeah, no, please.
I got three things to say. Sorry. Dang it.
Let's do it. Let's give me three, Nick.
Yes, give me three. Mel Wells as Mushnick is just an absolute treasure.
Bring me whiskey, rum, wine, gin, bourbon.
What?
Scotch, rye, tequila, sake, Manischewitz.
Did you bring the money?
Don't bug me with the money. I got to get drunk now.
What flipped him?
I don't know.
Look, here, take it. Bring me anything. Bring me everything. Creme de mint. Everything you got.
Okay.
Travis, what happened?
Don't ask.
You look like you've seen a ghost.
Ghosts I could handle. Don't ask.
Why don't you tell me? Maybe I could help you.
Help you couldn't.
Try and eat something. It'll calm your aggravation.
In mine own shop. Audrey, you wouldn't believe it.
I wish you'd break out and tell me.
All right, I'll tell you tomorrow, right after I am telling the police.
Yes.
He is so funny. He's got so many one-liners, and then he like the play on words that he used, the writer uses with his accent. Like some dame is like, "Oh, the people will just eat it up, this plant," you know, and then he's like, "Oh, eat up the people."
Yes.
Just like little things like that. It's just like, oh, god damn, that's smart. And then the cops, when we get introduced to the detectives in this,
Oh my God, yes.
and they are just exchanging, they're having a conversation about these murders, and they're just exchanging one word statements back and forth at each other as kind of like a jab of film noir, the way that the like fast talking detectives talk. Oh my God, I love that so much.
How's the wife, Frank?
Not bad, Joe.
Glad to hear it. The kids?
Lost one yesterday.
Lost one, eh? How'd that happen?
Playing some matches.
Well, those are breaks.
Yeah, I guess so.
Got a strange one here. Railroad people say they lost one of their best detectives the other night.
Oh, yeah?
Down by the yards. He was watching the refrigerator cars.
Refrigerator cars?
Ice thieves.
Oh, yeah? What happened?
Don't know. Vanished. Blood on tracks.
Clues?
None.
Anything else?
Dennis. Farm.
Dead?
Missing.
Clues?
Blood in office.
Where?
Skid Row.
Ideas?
None.
Check it out.
Yeah.
That scene is so fucking funny.
So funny. I was like,
it's so smooth too. Like
So
it's like it almost feels effortless, but
Yeah.
you're like, they really took the time to like think how this conversation would flow if this was how these two people interacted with each other, which is really funny.
And again, it's just crazy to think, as you mentioned,
Mhm.
the film was written,
Yeah.
you know, in I think they finished it in a weekend, but I think he spent like 2 weeks writing it. The
Yeah.
original writer,
Which
But-
is still insane.
which is still
Yeah.
insane. They rehearsed Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, shot Thursday, Friday, and that just shows.
And they were done.
One of the reasons I picked this is just like that shows the raw talent that Corman possessed, because this original
Yes.
film sparked a pop culture staple. It sparked a very successful Broadway production, a great musical film. Both the musical and this original have become cult classics.
Mhm.
And this was just Corman saying, let's make something because we're going to have some sets available to us. And
Yeah.
with what he was given, which was not much, and what he had to work with, which was even less, he made something spectacular. Really, really, really spectacular. And that is a credit to his talent. Impressive film.
If you guys want to watch The Little Shop of Horrors, it's streaming for free on Amazon Prime right now, which is really nice. And
Nice.
then it's free on all those like Tubi, Pluto TV, Plex, Freevee, if you have any of those, just like free streaming services. But yeah, it's a really good time.
It's a really
I
good
highly
time.
recommend this movie, especially if you love like, I don't know, like Twilight Zone type stuff. For me, I
Mhm.
grew up watching like that and like so many black and white movies on Turner Classic Movie Channel that like if you grew up with that type of stuff, I feel like you would love this movie. So
Yeah,
it's
I
worth
think
the watch.
if you're a fan of comedy and like especially like if you're a stand-up comedy, sorry,
Mhm.
if you're a stand-up comic, you should watch this movie because just pay attention to the delivery on this shit and how there's
Yeah.
just like no wasted space. The comedic timing in this film is so unbelievably good.
So yeah, Amazon Prime, whole bunch of other streaming platforms. Check it out. Let us know what you guys think.
Okay, switching gears now to a not so funny film.
Yeah.
See, here's what I did. I picked 3 very different movies directed
Oh,
by
yeah.
one man that were made in one decade. So, I mean, when we talk
Pretty
about
insane.
the span of this man's career and what he was able to do, this is, you know, we say this a lot. Oh, we didn't scratch the surface. No, this is not corn in a fat man's shit. You know, like this is, we are not even anywhere near what this man accomplished in his career. You're going to hear just so many different kinds of movies. So anyways, I'm rambling here.
Yes.
We're
No, I
going
love it.
to just 2 years later after
Insane.
Little Shop of Horrors, we have The Intruder, which is directed by Roger Corman, produced by Roger and his brother Gene. It is written by Charles Beaumont, which is based off of his novel, which is also titled The Intruder. We are in a small southern town of Caxton. It's the 1960s, early 1960s. And the whites-only high school is about to undergo a forced desegregation. So the mostly white southern town full of mostly racist isn't too pleased about this desegregation. And in fact, they hate it. But it's the law. It is the law. So they have accepted it. That is until a slick, well-mannered, smooth-talking piece of shit named Adam Kramer strolls into this town. And Kramer, who is played by William Shatner, a very young William Shatner, is working on behalf of the Patrick Henry Society. And his aim is essentially to stir up these white folk with a bunch of rah-rah speeches about how the black man and desegregation are going to destroy the town, destroy the country. Sounds pretty familiar.
Yeah.
And the antagonization works.
Mm-hmm.
And this quiet town of racist folk becomes an intense, violent town of a giant, angry mob. And the black people of this town are put through hell. And the town is kind of forced to come face to face with just how ugly they are. Now, for as many horror films as Roger Corman has made in his career, which again is hundreds, I think The Intruder may be his scariest film he's ever made, and it is not a horror film.
Yeah.
So Bella, what were your thoughts on The Intruder?
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. It's kind of funny. This was the one film out of the 3 we chose that I went into completely blind, which may not have been the best decision because right off the bat, like the language and the context just really took me. I was like, wait, what is going on? What is this movie about? But then obviously I like very quickly put together what this movie was about. Honestly, I thought this was an incredible film. So impactful and authentic and like truly horrifying. And when I say like authentic, I mean like it's wild to see a film that directly tackles like the social commentary and like the violent fallout surrounding the ruling of Brown versus Board of Education, which was only a few years before this, and just like the tumultuous process of the integration in the South, which was literally occurring and ongoing at the time of this film's production and release, which is just like mind-blowing for me to think about. So I think like the time period of this film is a crucial factor in the storytelling and like the overall tone of it, Like, it felt very ahead of its time in that way. And that being said, I think there are also so many aspects of it that are still so relevant today, specifically William Shatner's character, Adam Kramer. You described him perfectly. I literally wrote down in my notes, smooth talking racist piece of shit. Dressed up in a nice white suit.
Yeah.
You know, I think we see really hateful, manipulative characters like this weaseling their way into powerful political positions in our government today. And I feel like we know all too well just how, like, one speech similar to Adam Kramer's big speech in this film, where he's saying, like, the only reason that this is happening is because you guys are weak and are letting it happen. That kind of thing can, like, very easily incite violence and cause people to feel validated and in spewing and acting on, like, their hateful and harmful beliefs. And so I thought it was honestly terrifying, and I think such a shocking parallel of William Shatner's character with certain people in the media and news today, and it just makes it that much more horrifying to see that in this film.
Now, I'm associated with the Patrick Henry Society, which is an organization dedicated to giving the people the truth. What I'm going to tell you is going to make your blood boil, because I'm going to show you that the way this country is going to go depends entirely and wholly and completely on you. Now, you all know that there was peace and quiet in the South before the NAACP started stirring up trouble. But what you don't know is that this so-called advancement of colored people is now and has always been nothing but a communist front headed by a Jew who hates America and doesn't make any bones about it either. Well, the commies didn't waste a second. They knew only too well, friends, that the quickest way to cripple a country is to mongrelize it. So they poured all the millions of dollars the Jews could get for them into this one thing: desegregation.
You know, like, while we have come so far from the events in this film, like, there are still fragments of this kind of, like, old world in our world today, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so the novel is inspired by true events. Actually, this guy, John Casper, did something similar to this in Clinton, Tennessee. And this John Casper cat was a white supremacist, essentially, from New York. He was, like, living up north, and he was like, I'm going to go to the South where they'll listen to what I got to say, you know? So anyways, that's what the novel was based on. Corman loved the novel. He was a big fan of desegregation, so he bought the rights to the novel in 1960. He went to United Artists to help him produce it, but they didn't want to make it. He went to, like, two or three other companies, all the companies where he had, like, already made movies for them and already turned a profit for them, and nobody wanted to touch this.
That's fucked up. That's wild.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not wild. I mean, that's
true. I guess
it makes sense
looking back
that they would not want to touch it. But Corman wanted to make it. So him and his brother Gene did something almost nobody in Hollywood ever does, which is they put up their own money for this. In fact, the Cormans even mortgaged their homes to get this picture made. And as you mentioned, Bella, they made it. I mean, this was the height of the segregation wars. This was not, like, made after the fact or in hindsight, you know, and, you know, we watch some movies that take place in the 60s or, you know, in the 1800s. You're like, man, it was bad back then. Now, this was Corman making a film saying, holding up a mirror to us and saying like, yo, this is us right now. Look at us. Not only that, as you mentioned, they were shooting this film in a small town in Missouri. And a lot of the people in this town were not too thrilled with what Corman was doing once they found out what Corman was doing. Because they kind of like didn't tell the townspeople what this movie was about. They saw Roger Corman's name and they saw the title, The Intruder, and they just assumed that it was like some exploitation horror movie. And so once they started picking up on things, they like started running them out of some of the shooting locations. They had to change hotels a couple of times. So they were living what they were making. And
I would imagine that would be so scary.
Yeah.
On so many levels. Like it's a very brave movie to make for everyone involved who worked on it, honestly.
Mm-hmm. That scene that you mentioned where Kramer is giving that big speech.
Mm-hmm.
I think Roger Corman was pretty nervous about shooting that scene because they brought in a whole bunch of extras who were like townspeople who lived in this real town. And they were like, oh my God, if they like figure out what we're doing with this film, they're going to figure it out in this speech. And they didn't want to like have some shit. And they're like giving these people fire torches and stuff, you know?
Oh my God. Yeah, it's not good. It's not looking good.
So what he did was he shot all these like wide shots of the crowd first and shot all the reaction shots of the crowd. And Shatner was giving just fractions of the speech. He wasn't doing like the whole thing. So they couldn't like glean what the whole thing was about. And then of course, when you ever, for any filmmakers listening, if you're going to ask a whole bunch of people to come be extras in your movie for free, you should do this, because if they're doing it for free, guess what? They ain't going to stay that long, because as soon as they start seeing how long it takes in between setups and how long this takes and that takes, they're going to start peeling off little by little. So that's what happened. And finally, around 4 a.m., when there was just a few more people left, he's like, all right, now let's turn the camera around on Shatner and get his speech. and that's how they did it safely. So I thought that was really smart. But
that's really smart, because that would not be good to deliver that kind of speech in that kind of setting. It would be whatever that saying is, like life imitates art.
Yeah, exactly.
So not good. Well, that's really cool. That's really some movie magic right there, if you will.
Yeah. And this film, you know, because it was so raw, because it was perhaps a little too real for 1962, it was a commercial failure. I think in their first screening, Gene Corman said that when they first did like a test screening, I wish I knew which state it was in. I don't. But there was nearly a riot started in the theater, and people were like standing up and saying like, you guys are communists. And one of the ushers came up and pushed Gene up against the wall and called him a communist.
Scary.
So this movie did not do well. The Cormans claimed that this was the only film they ever made that they didn't make money on.
Okay.
But it was a critical success, and as time has marched on, it has earned a lot of respect. And I wanted to talk about this one today just because it's rare to find a non-exploitation film of Roger Corman's. This is a serious, dramatic piece of art, and it had a lot to say about the country then, and has a lot to say about the country now. And I just think it's a powerful piece that he doesn't get enough credit for, like from the grander cinephile community and film critics and stuff. Like he's always just known as like, he's a schlock master. It's like, yeah, but he can do this too.
Dude can go deep. He can do it. Deep. Yeah, I think on top of like, I know I talked a lot about kind of like the darker aspects of this movie, but I guess in a way on like a brighter side of things, one thing I thought was so cool about this movie, especially in the context of the time period, was I thought it had a really great depiction of like with Tom McDaniels, the newspaper editor in this film. They did a great way of showing him like experiencing and acknowledging his own privilege, like white privilege specifically. He kind of has this almost like aha moment, if you will, where he's like, it's after Adam Kramer's really scary, crazy speech in the town square, and there's a black family driving through the town, and the like white racist mob comes and starts harassing them, and it's really scary and evil. And the Tom McDaniel's character like steps up and defends them. He's like, look at what you guys are doing. Like, this is crazy. This is literally insane. And from that moment forward, he kind of starts to like, we get to see him take the time to like reflect on his own personal beliefs versus like the beliefs that were just ingrained into him by his hometown and his society.
Right.
And I thought that was really interesting to see, where he's like, especially in another scene, Vern Shipman, the character, like the big character that Adam Kramer goes to for support, is he like the mayor of the town, or is he just a very influential man in the town?
I gather that he was just kind of like a very
about.
influential man in the town. Like he's like the rich guy who's moved.
The rich guy.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, because I was like, this dude is powerful somehow.
Yeah, probably comes from like old plantation money or something.
Yeah, like a really, really sick man.
Mm-hmm.
But he, after that speech, he's like all high off of it and saying all these like really scary, threatening, violent things. And Tom literally says, he's like, do you even hear what you're saying?
Yeah.
And I really like that moment, because Tom is like taking the time to just be like, listen to how fucking crazy you sound. Like, you're talking about hurting other people. And yeah, so I really like this moment of like clarity, and just how he's realizing that like this Adam Kramer character is genuinely dangerous, and he's like brainwashing this entire town to become even more dangerous and just into this like chaotic state. But then there's a really interesting conflict where, as much as he despises Adam Kramer, he's kind of like glad to have met him, because he even says he like forced Tom to face himself for the first time,
right?
Like face his own ideology and views. And he's never really thought about racism before. Literally, he's just like been living his whole life not thinking twice about what he's saying or believing. And then he's like, yeah, I thought about it, and I realized that I do support desegregation or integration, whatever. And it's kind of like funny in that way, looking back on it, because you're just like, duh. But I thought it was a really nice moment in the film that has a lot of really intense, like traumatic themes and stuff like that.
Yeah, the movie is after what is great about this country. The movie is after what the ideals of this country are. And
yeah,
I think what it's trying to do is say, like, it's in there in us if you just actually stop and think about this for a second and understand what you're. But and trigger warning for listeners who are interested in seeing this film, which you absolutely should. It is is an underrated gem, but there is a lot of use of the N-word in this film. So
yeah,
if that is a deterrent for you for this film, totally understand. But it is incessant.
Yeah, my roommate was like, what are you watching? I was like, I don't have time to explain.
I'm watching
this
YouTube
right now. Yeah. I was like, it's actually a really great film. But yeah, it is definitely a difficult watch.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important to give that trigger warning for sure, to be honest.
Yeah, there's some versions of it on YouTube. I'll be honest, I couldn't find I saw a version of this. I think it must have been on TCM or something years ago, and it looked great and sounded great. Rewatching it, there's some versions of it on YouTube that are like okay, and then it's free on the Roku channel or app also, but it also like has kind of the same meh quality as the YouTube. So my hope is that maybe Criterion, if you're listening, because I know the Criterion channel, they're just such a big fan of this podcast. If you're listening to this, I suggest I nominate The Intruder for a Criterion Collection Blu-ray, or to put The Intruder on the Criterion channel so that all cinephiles can watch this in a crisp and clean
Yes.
release.
That would be awesome. I think your wish will come true.
I think so. I think
think it deserves it.
Mm-hmm. So yes, so check that out. It is a wonderful film, and I'm glad Roger Corman decided to mortgage his house to make it.
Yeah, thank you. Worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that was heavy. So we're going to take a quick break, everybody. And during that break, you are going to hear from PGA producer, Gimme 3 producer, and my wife, Sonia Maru, as she is going to take you through our favorite segment called Sonia's Movie Minute. So stick around for that and our final Roger Corman film after the break.
Hello, I'm Sonia, and this is my Movie Minute. Roger Corman nurtured a generation of filmmakers, and that got me thinking of how independent and repertory cinemas nurture the next generation of cinephiles and filmmakers. These theaters introduce audiences to the work of people like Roger Corman, Hal Ashby, Dorothy Arzner, and Cheryl Dunye, as well as international filmmakers like Claire Denis, Wong Kar-wai, and Mira Nair, just to name a very few. And these theaters are becoming some of the last places in the US and maybe around the world where you can see 35mm prints on a regular basis. In this time of digital filmmaking and streaming, sadly, people need to be made aware of the special experience of watching film projection. When I was growing up, it was all we knew. Repertory theaters especially are a place where you find a wide range of people gathering together to see an old favorite or discover a new one. Recently, I went to a screening at the New Beverly of Sleeping Beauty and Cinderella, both on IB Tech prints, and there were children as young as 4 years old, as well as senior citizens and everyone in between. Plus, a lot of people in princess costumes. Barbie got a lot of press last summer for the groups of people in themed outfits going to that movie, but that happens weekly at repertory screenings. In these theaters, film is an art, not a commodity. They create spaces for the relatively young art of filmmaking to be appreciated, discovered, and preserved in a way that museums do for paintings or concert halls do for music. And just on a personal level, they're crucial to my day-to-day happiness, too. I have to give love to a few of my favorites. The Angelica in New York. I've seen so many movies there, most recently the incredible Past Lives. The Alamo Drafthouse, which started in Austin, Texas, and has expanded to locations all over the country. The Music Box in Chicago, a fantastic theater, and plus, my friends Jessica and Anton had their first date there and later got married there. In LA, the revamped and wonderful Vidiots, the New Art, LA's home for Rocky Horror, the American Cinematheque, they always have incredible Q&As, the Laemmle Theaters, my local cinema, and a frequent home to many film festivals, including our very own Los Angeles Diversity Film Festival. And last, the New Beverly Cinema, owned by Quentin Tarantino, Nick's home away from home, and the only one on this list where it's always on film.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Gimme 3 podcast, a series for cinephiles. And we are in the midst of our tribute to the legend, Roger Corman, who passed away May 9th, earlier this month. And thus far, we have talked about Little Shop of Horrors, his 1960 film, and we've talked about The Intruder from 1962, his dramatic, passionate work on The Intruder. We're going to round out the 60s here with another great film directed by Roger Corman and another film that had a tremendous cultural impact on these United States of America.
The final Roger Corman film that we've selected today is a very unique film. I would say it strays from maybe the more conventional storytelling structure that we've seen in the other films we talked about today. It was written by Jack Nicholson, which is really cool. We get another collaboration with Nicholson and Corman today. And it came out in 1967, and it's called The Trip.
I'm Peter Fonda. We've just finished making a movie dealing with the most talked about subject of the day, LSD. I honestly believe it will be today's most talked about motion picture.
The name of the picture is The Trip.
Here goes.
Yep, you guessed it. It's about taking acid.
The Trip, man.
The Trip, man. Groovy, man. So the film stars Peter Fonda as Paul Groves, who is a director. Mostly, it seems, for commercials, ads on TV, that kind of thing. And he seems very dissatisfied in his work. It's not really the kind of work that, or like art that he set out to do as a director. And on top of it all, he's currently going through a pretty brutal divorce. So Paul turns to his friend John, played by Bruce Dern, who is very well versed in the land of acid. And he suggests that Paul should take some to help him, to help get him out of his creative rut and his negative headspace from dealing with his divorce. Naturally, Paul agrees to let John be his guide or his trip sitter for his first time tripping. Paul hopes to discover something, anything really, about himself through this kind of transformative experience. And for a first time trip, Paul goes fucking hard, man. He takes more, what I think is more than enough acid to hallucinate fantastical worlds with bizarre characters. He has erotic love affairs and just a whole bunch of wild adventures, and he even experiences his own death. So throughout the film, we see that Paul has like a series of high highs and low lows as he experiences the beauty and the joy of LSD, but also the not so great moments of paranoia and just intense confusion. The Trip is not your typical plot-driven film. It's kind of a visual experience, I would say. Like, it's basically the embodiment of an acid trip, but specifically within like the sociopolitical climate of the 1960s. There's a lot of commentary on like the controversy and divisiveness surrounding LSD and its effects, but then it also touches on like how sometimes these psychedelic experiences can literally reshape our consciousness and can make us realize certain things about our world or our societies that we maybe didn't think about too deeply before. So I thought this was a really, really fun film. I'm always here for like just a super stylized visual odyssey. So this is my kind of shit. Maybe not for everybody, but I had a great time. Nick, what were your thoughts on this film?
Well, I was on acid while I watched it, so it really...
awesome.
I think it's my favorite film of all time. No, just kidding. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I heard about this movie for a long time and what it means, what followed this film. So I've always been interested in checking it out. I liked it a lot. I thought it's different for Corman. I mean, 3 very different projects.
Yeah, it feels very different.
There's just a lot of like trip ass montages, a lot of like poetic visualization happening. It's just like fast cuts and it's like boom, boom. It's very,
oh my God,
very
yeah.
1967.
Yes.
Yeah. So I liked it. My big complaint was the sound mix in this film was dog shit.
Yeah.
But you know what's not dog shit is Peter Fonda's bare ass. We get a lot of Peter Fonda's bare ass in this movie. Yeah. A whole lot of it.
Yep. It's very true.
And I know our Corman fans, Corman heads have been like, my God, you've talked about 2 Corman movies and where's the boobies? There's been no boobies thus far. Well, there's boobies in The Trip. So there you go. We got boobies. We weren't going to do a Corman show without talking about boobies. Boobies are here in The Trip.
There's one booby shot that they loved in this movie. They had to show it probably, I'm not even exaggerating, probably 25 times in one single like montage. It was actually really funny.
Well,
we love this shot.
We had to make up for the no boobies. 25 shots of 2 different pairs of boobies.
It was so funny. Just kept coming back to it. I was like, yep, looks great. Looks good. It's really funny.
So, I mean, I don't know if there are any cops listening to this episode. So, I just want to say that I have never done acid. But if I had, here are some things that I noticed that were extremely accurate. Here's my list of accuracies.
Yeah.
The hallucinations of being on set that you were just on earlier in the day. If I had done acid in my life, maybe that had happened to me.
Probably would happen. Yeah.
There's just one line where Bruce Dern's character's like talking to Fonda and he's like, yeah, come on, man. There's music inside. There's music inside? Yeah. Oh, brother. I've never done acid, but if I had done acid, maybe that conversation would have happened sometime.
That conversation was so good.
Want to take a walk? Yeah. Never done acid, but I'm sure.
Oh my God, I loved that. He's like, can we? He's like, take a walk? He's like, yeah.
And then coming face to face with your personal demons and the sins of your country in the same breath.
Powerful stuff, man.
I've never done acid, but if I had done acid, I feel like that would have happened to me. And then, so anyways, those were just a few of the, and then also that when he first drops and he pulls the eye cover over his eyes and we go into the kaleidoscope thing. Again, I never done acid, but if I had done acid, I just want to say that's pretty accurate.
Fractals.
So there are all these accuracies with the LSD experience, and it is because of course, Mr. Jack Nicholson, he knew about some LSD. Nicholson claims he never did it for fun. He was like, but he did it. He was like, why would I voluntarily stare into the face of God? That doesn't sound like fun to me. And I believe him.
Yeah, it's like fair.
But Corman, despite, making all this exploitation cinema and all these crazy horror films and biker films and all this crazy stuff, he was a pretty straight-laced dude. If you hear him talk, he sounds like very refined, very gentlemanly, like he's very proper,
Yeah.
But he was like, well, I can't make a film about LSD without trying LSD. So Corman did it, and he said he had a wonderful and great trip. And he was like, I had to have Jack Nicholson as my consultant for the bad trip elements because I had a great trip.
That's good. I'm happy to hear that. Because it's funny to hear that too, because like the very beginning of this film has like a disclaimer where it's like, these are fictional. This is a fictional imagination of what it's like to take acid, and like acid is illegal and it's a dangerous drug. And it was funny to see that. Like, I was just like, imagine they had to do that for every movie that has like an acid trip scene nowadays. It would be too much.
Well, the funny thing about that, Bella, is, that thing was playing and Sonia was in the room when I started the film and she was like, is this like an anti-acid movie?
Yeah, it seemed like it's going to be.
Well,
but then it's not.
But what happens is, the end is kind of like, it kind of ends abruptly, and and they like do, there's this line that Peter Fonda's character says, and the woman that he's with says, he says something akin to like, I'm actually feeling, pretty good. And I feel like, revitalized, something to that effect. And then she says, well, just wait till tomorrow. And then it freeze frames on Peter Fonda's face. And there's this cheesy ass glass shatter effect. And you're like, what the fuck? So
it's like, oh wait, I'll think about it tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then it's like,
so that was the studio's idea. That was the studio, American International Pictures, changed the ending of the film to make it kind of like, don't do drugsy,
Oh my God.
And they did not tell Roger Corman about that.
Oh my God, are you
until it was
serious?
too late, and Corman was pissed.
I bet. I mean, in a way though, I feel like it kind of backfired because for me, I was like, "Oh, that's sick!" Like he had a mind shattering experience, and it was so like he's been transformed. It's like that idea of where I read a lot about psychedelics because I'm really interested in like the therapy and just like the ways that they can like help people with like mental health and addiction.
Yes, that's how I learned about these accuracies too. I read about them.
Yeah. And so I love like the idea of I read someone had like described it as I guess like a ski resort, like a mountain with like all the ski trails in them, and then when you take it like snows and you're able to like ski down it again and have these new tracks of like thinking. And so that's kind of what I thought when I saw the like mind shatter thing. I was like, "Oh, cool. Like he has a new way of seeing the world."
Right.
So that's pretty funny that they did that to be like, crack the egg in the pan. This is your brain on drugs.
Yeah,
like,
right. I think that's what they were going for, but they didn't anticipate, so many brilliant, mind altering, mind open, third eye open viewers saying, yeah, man, the world's changing, man.
Yes, I totally agree. No, it's just I was thinking about like your list, and one thing I would add to it that I thought was really funny was when John, Bruce Dern's character, is the most goated trip sitter ever. Like besides losing his tripping child.
Yeah.
But like the setting that he creates for Paul is so magical.
Dude.
Like the apartment with a bridge in it. I thought that scene was hilarious. Paul's like kind of getting paranoid and he's like, the bridge is a trap. And he's like, oh, okay. Like, but he has to go over it to get to the living room. He keeps calling it the living room.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh my God, I never thought about that. Like, I love that. And John kind of like laughs at him and he's like, what? Like, what's so funny? Why are you laughing at me? It's just the way you said living room. So I thought that was a great scene that I just had to mention.
That was.
Because
that
house was insane.
Bruce Dern looks great in this movie, doesn't he?
Yeah, he really does, honestly. He's such a sweet character too. I love how he'll just be like, tell me what you're seeing. And he'll tell him and he's like, man, your mind is really beautiful, man.
He's like, you're seeing some beautiful stuff, man. You're doing great. You're doing great, buddy.
It's like, good job. I'm proud of you. Yeah, this is one hell of a groovy movie, man.
It's groovy,
honestly.
Man. It's groovy.
I think it's a great time capsule of the era as well, like specifically through the lens of like the more free-spirited, open-minded kind of individuals and cultural movement of this time.
Well, which brings us to the legacy of this film, which...
Yeah, I'm very curious.
So the movie that Corman made before this was a movie called Wild Angels, which was a biker movie about biker gangs, loosely based off of the Hells Angels.
Awesome.
So Wild Angels, which that movie also starred Peter Fonda, by the way.
Oh, cool.
So Wild Angels and The Trip, both of those films inspired directly Dennis Hopper to make Easy Rider. And Dennis Hopper, who's in this film, he's in The Trip.
So funny.
So Hopper and Peter Fonda get together. They're like, man, Corman was so successful with this Wild Angels movie and the Trip movie, and like this is what the zeitgeist needs right now. We're on the precipice of something here. So they decide to make this Easy Rider film. They're like, we want Roger Corman to be the executive producer of it. So Corman takes the movie to American International Pictures, since he made Wild Angels for them and The Trip for them, and they were both very profitable. And then, so they're having the meeting with all of them. And in that meeting, one executive, we'll just call him a square, tells Dennis Hopper, if you fall more than 1 day behind schedule on this film, we want the right to replace you as director.
Jeez.
And that did not go over well with Dennis Hopper or Peter Fonda. And Corman saw that and he was like, guys, look, I trust Dennis Hopper. I worked with this guy before. I know he can do it. I know he can make this film. But at that point, I think things had kind of fallen apart. After some back and forth, the picture ends up moving to Columbia and American International Pictures and Roger Corman, but more American International Pictures, passed on one of the most successful independent films ever made. Easy Rider, of course, many credit for being the catalyst of New Hollywood, and the filmmakers of Easy Rider credit Roger Corman for being the catalyst for Easy Rider. So, so that is kind of like the legacy of this film. It is kind of like the baby, or the mother, whatever way you want to look at it, of Easy Rider.
That's so cool. I love that. It was funny to see Dennis Hopper in this. I need to watch more of his movies because I think all I've seen of him is him in Blue Velvet, and it was bad because I just can't take him seriously. Like, having seen that, I'm like, I need to be more immersed in his work so I can get over that really disturbing role.
Well, we'll find a way to implement Easy Rider here coming up soon, because that's a must watch. But yeah, so a fascinating film and a damn good trip, if you ask me.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. That's all I got on I guess Jack Nicholson and Roger Corman's The Trip.
And the last thing I want to say about just kind of these three movies and why we picked them. And I don't know, for decades, Corman was not taken seriously, but the real fans know, And so, Mr. Corman, again, I just want to say thank you wherever you are. We take you seriously here at the Gimme 3 podcast, and this won't be the last time we discuss your work on this show. And we had a great time watching these ones. I was happy that I was able to watch Little Shop of Horrors. And I text Max actually after I watched it, because Little Shop the musical is one of his favorites. I was like, dude, you got to watch the original. You will love it. It's so funny. So
I'm excited to hear what he thinks of the ending. If there's one thing I took away from this too, it's I think of Roger Corman as the king of abrupt endings in all three of these movies. It's just like, bam, that's it.
No denouement, no aftermath.
I love it though.
Story's over.
No,
go home.
Yeah, story's over. Yeah. It's like such an amazing climax, and then you're just like, credits rolling. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Very different experience.
Absolutely. Well, that is a wrap on the Gimme 3 podcast. Join us next week when we are joined by a guest. Jess McLaughlin is going to be joining us for an episode highlighting queer horror films to kick off Pride Month. And speaking of queer horror films, Bella, you have a special announcement to make regarding our queer horror episode. Is that right?
Yes. So as our followers know, and listeners, of course, we had an Instagram poll up for you guys to choose our 6th film for the queer horror episode. And I'm very excited to announce that film is Neil Jordan's 1994 gothic drama, Interview with the Vampire, starring Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt, and a very young Kirsten Dunst. So
very young.
This movie's been on my watch list for a long time. I'm so excited to check it out. So stay tuned for that episode coming up.
Yeah, next week, Jess, our guest, is going to give us 3 films, and I'll be given one. Bella's going to be given one, and of course, you guys picked our final one, Interview with the Vampire. So we are going to be breaking that up into 2 episodes. So stay tuned. Next Monday and next Thursday, we're going to have a double bill of Gimme 3 for you. And we just did our poll on Pixar films, so thank you all for participating in that, and keep an eye out for more polls by following us on Instagram at the Gimme 3 podcast. That's GIMME3 spell out 3 podcast. Gimme 3 podcast. You can slide into our DMs there, or you can text us by scrolling down, go into our episode description and clicking the link that says send us a text message. Let us know what you think of the show. Let us know what you think of these movies, and shoot us any questions or suggestions that you may have. We'd love to hear them, and we may even read them on the air. Bella, tell the lovely folks where they can find you on the socials.
Yeah, you guys can find me on Instagram at Portrait of a Cinephile, or on Letterboxd at BF Stratus. Just B and then my last name, F Stratus.
You can find me on Letterboxd at Nicholas Ibarra, on Instagram at Nicholas Ibarra, and on Twitter, also known as X, at Nicholas P. Ibarra, and the P stands for Perky. Thank you all for listening to the Gimme 3 podcast, and we'll see you at the movies.